Hey, in this video I want to show you how I made this super cool Tron City animation scene and building that I plan on using in a future photo shoot, but for now I think it's just super cool and it's very easy and renders almost instantly because it's made in Eevee. So these are the objects that I used to make it. As you can see, very simple cubes and mirror modifiers. It's really nothing fancy. I barely did any fine detail work. If you switch over to material mode, ooh, isn't that pretty? Let's switch to our camera, press play, look at that. It's rendering in real time. I love Blender. This is amazing. All this stuff I made by hand. Again, it's really easy shapes, which I'll show you how to make in just a minute. Great for backgrounds, desktop pictures, animations, and what have you. Now the reason that this is able to render so fast is because there is no ray tracing. Ray tracing is when rays of light are bouncing around. The computer has to calculate, trace, and estimate where they should be and what it's going to look like when they hit objects around other objects that are bouncing light off, and it gets more and more complicated the more realistic the photo is. But there's none of that happening right here. This is just shapes and meshes with images slapped on that are glowing, and there's a really cool glow done by the bloom effect, which just makes everything look super beautiful and cyberpunky. And also there is a background image, which is just a big cloudy sky to give kind of a hazy look. And I'm going to find a better one later once I've really finalized this thing. And that's just imported as a plane. So let's get to modeling this thing and we'll make our very own Tron City scene in Eevee. File, New, General. Don't save changes. Before we get to working on the 3D stuff, I do need to show you what I did in Photoshop to make this all possible. So the first thing I did before I even started with the 3D is I knew that I needed some good textures to work with, some squares, some grids, some things like that, especially for the street. And that's how it's all going to glow and require us to do almost zero modeling. So let's start a new document. It doesn't have to be high definition. So I did the kind of a small size for Blender, which is 1024 by 1024. Which is going to open up with a pure white Photoshop document. We don't want white, we want it actually black, so Control I is going to invert this current layer. Hit Z for zoom and fit screen, so we have our full screen filled up. Now here's all I did. I used the brush tool, and I have a square brush. I made it myself, which I have another video on how to make brushes on my YouTube. Find that if you need it. If you don't, you can use a circle brush, I guess. But I like the square brush because it ensured that I had hard edges everywhere, no rounded edges, because that's what we want. This is techno circuit world, so straight lines everywhere. So with my square brush selected, I made it, about yay big. Make sure the color is pure white so that we can paint like this. And if it's jumpy and imperfect, make sure your spacing is really low. And this is in your brush settings, which you can find in Window, Brush Settings right there, F5. If the spacing is up too high, you're going to get jumps, which is annoying if you're painting a straight line. But we are actually going to use that for some of our patterns we're going to paint. So let's make the street texture first, and then I'll show you how to make a basic, a line-based texture we'll use later. So we're going to draw down the center of the picture. So I'm going to turn on my rulers and turn on my guides. I'm going to draw a guide right in the middle, right there. If you don't understand guides and rulers, I have a video about how to do layouts and albums, and it really helps to learn that part. So I'm going to click down here on the line and hold Shift to draw a perfectly straight line, no matter if my mouse, goes left or right. There we go. And then let's draw a solid line on the side. Open our brush settings, turn down the spacing all the way. You can use brackets to make your brush bigger or smaller. So I'm going to click Shift and hold the Shift while I paint. Click, hold Shift, and paint downwards. Oops. Make sure you hit Shift after you press down your first mouse press. There. And maybe some little lines to kind of decorate it, make it look fancier. Now you may be saying, it's really hard for me to draw the same thing on both sides. I keep getting the spacing different. Well, here's an awesome trick. In a recent version of Photoshop, they introduced this, and I don't know why this hasn't been there for 20 years already, because it's very helpful. Click on vertical. And now, just click the checkbox. Anything we paint over here is over there. And vice versa. How awesome. So, let's undo this line we drew. Make sure symmetry is on. Yes. Let's draw our thick line again. Awesome. Look at that. We are doing half the work and getting twice the result. And don't be afraid to use very thin lines, because sometimes on your renders, you will be able to see these very fine details, and it'll just make things look even cooler. Okay, so that's going to be a street texture. Let's make another texture to use on the buildings. Control I, turn our symmetry on to vertical, click the check mark, and let's draw a few just kind of techno-looking designs. You can make sure to hold shift after you press down, and then I start where I left off and draw a line like that. Vary the thickness of your line a lot. That'll give a lot more interest to your images. Now I'm going to speed this up a little bit, and you can see me draw this random design. I have no idea what I'm doing right now, so we'll see what happens. Okay, that turned out way cooler than I thought it would be. I actually learned a cool little trick. If you're painting with a really thin pixel line, let me turn my spacing off. You may have noticed I use spacing to get some cool designs. I'm going to put my spacing back to 0. If you're drawing with like a 1 pixel line and you trace back over itself, it makes it like brighter and brighter. You can see there's kind of a variation in brightness with some of these lines. Over here I did it a bunch. And it's a very subtle trick, but I think it'll add some interesting level of detail. So again, I painted, held shift, and I went backwards. It makes it brighter. And if you literally just wiggle back and forth, it makes it brighter and brighter. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so this is a good starting point. I suggest making maybe 3 or 4 of these different types of designs that have different styles to them. Maybe this one has some 90-degree angles. You could have one that has more boxes and squares, one that's just strictly vertical. You do need to have a little bit of variety in your textures to use in your final design. Let me show you the ones that I made that I actually used in the final render that you saw earlier. So I made this one. This is just like a square grid. I made this one that's a plus sign that's used along the side of the road. I was actually designing horizontal strips in sets of 4, but then I actually regretted doing that because tiling them in Blender wasn't working because this is one image. So I didn't want this image to repeat. So that's why I just that's why I had to make individual square images for each piece that I wanted individually. And this, while it was a good idea, didn't actually work out. So here are the individual slices. I actually used slices in Photoshop to cut this thing up into separate images so I wouldn't have to work, do extra work. So I have these individual, very horizontal pieces that are going to be tiled and used in Blender. Now let me make one more image to play with. And again, let me speed this up really quick so I don't waste your time. Alright, this is going to be our vertical oriented graphic. Let's save these real quick. So I'm just going to call it Tron Grid. Or Tron Texture, Tron Text, there we go. Just save as a JPEG. You don't have to do anything fancy. We don't have transparency. This is not a height map, so you don't need to do any fancy image format. Tron Text 2, and this will be Tron Road. Okay, now that we got the images made, let's make the road by doing Shift A, click on Mesh, and make a plane. Go into Edit mode with Tab, and press S for scale and Y. Do 10. So we just scaled along the y-axis of 10, value of 10. So it's 10 times as long as it is wide. That's going to be our main road. Get out of edit mode by pressing tab again. G, Y, we're going to move it out of the way because we want the center to be where our building is. It's going to make things easier. I don't need my big old light visible, so I'm just actually going to delete it because in Eevee, what we're going to do, we don't really need a light. Our 3D cursor is still in the middle, which is good. So we're going to add a cube, Shift A, Mesh, Cube. And we're going to add a mirror modifier, which means we're only going to make one side and it's going to make the other side. Sound familiar? Basically what we just did in Photoshop. So go to your wrench, add modifier, mirror, and make it on the x-axis. Because remember, y is down the street, right? X is left and right, or what, east and west. So we're going to go into tab mode. Move this over on the X. You can press the letter X so it sticks right on the X-axis. So let's move it close to itself. You don't have to be exact because most of this building is literally going to be black, and the only parts that are really going to be seen is the emission lights that we just made in Photoshop. So you really don't need to be clean and perfectionist with this modeling. Plus, it's just a tutorial. Once you master what I've taught you, you can go off and make amazing things and show me later. Okay, I'm going to switch to my move tool up here. This makes it a little bit easier to move things around. Now we're going to make the base of this tower, this building, pretty big and pretty wide. And we're going to make it smaller and smaller as we go up. Oh, I forgot to do this. Let's make our mirror modifier invisible for just a second. We need to delete this inside face. Right click on it, delete face. That will allow us to do a few modeling tricks that we can't do if we saw that face here. Like this one. If you press I for inset, and then B, look at this. It insets along the border. That is so awesome because we're going to be building this building upwards. So E, I, now look at this. We can't do it again. B doesn't do anything right now because we have an inside face. But that's okay. At least we got this building started. So I'm just pressing E to extrude. And maybe move this in a little bit. E to move up again. Maybe scale it along the Y. Again, we're making a tower, so it's got to kind of get skinnier as it goes up. E again. Let's grab this one face on this side. Move it in. Kind of fake a bevel. There we go. Here's a trick that's kind of breaking some rules, but it looks good. Shift D on one face and then press enter. Now look, we have the same face. Now I'm going to put it right back where it was by pressing escape. S, Y, G, Z. I just moved it down on the Z. Maybe make it a little bit skinnier. So S, X, S, Y. So we're going to move it up. Scale that on the Y. E, extrude it up again. E to extrude it up again and shrink this on the Y. We're just adding some interesting shapes, really. It's just, there's no rules to this kind of thing. You just kind of build however you want. But I do generally like things to get narrower as they go up. And I'm going to keep this cool symmetry like crease in the middle to make the top of the tower look really cool. We need a few extra structures out here. So I'm going to grab this shape, this face right here, and Shift D again. And let's make it a little bit narrower. Move it back to the center and extrude it out. This is going to be like the front of the building. Grab that face, move it down. Let's grab this edge and bevel it, Control B. Extrude that out a little bit. Maybe move this edge. Oops, that's vertices. Maybe move this edge in. Now here's a cool sci-fi shape I like to do. If I press number 3, or actually number 1, gives us a front view. So E, go up, move it over. E up, and move that back over where it was. And E again, and shrink this on the Y. There we go. Cool, like a little double antenna, tower, energy beam thing shooting up, which we can totally add a beam shooting upwards in the middle. That would be cool. Alright, so that's good for the building. Let's add some road structures to add some kind of interesting stuff going on the side of the road, because if our camera is right around here, we want some light posts and other highways and stuff going around. So let's get out of edit modes, because we're going to make a brand new cube right there. Move it out here, and then tab, and then move it over. Because look, in edit mode, when you move things, the origin point stays where it was. Right there, that little yellow dot. Which means when we add the mirror modifier, I always lose it, there it is, it's going to mirror based on the center point, which is the x-axis mirror. It's going over here on the left side. Cool, so let's shrink this down by doing SZ. Move it way back over here, and we're just gonna draw basically a little road here. So E, maybe move it up. E, E, move it back down. E, E, grab this face. E out there. Move it back. E, move it down. E like that, okay? Got some interesting height differences there. And we can even add another one doing the opposite. So I grab this face because I like the direction it's facing. Shift D, Y, which means duplicate it and move it on the Y. Make it skinnier though. SX, E, E, now move it up like an overpass. E like that. E, grab this face. Oh, sorry, lots of E's. You get the point. I'm extruding. I'll stop saying it. Cool. And maybe add a little tower or something. Shift D to get this face. I'm just going to move it. Doesn't have to be exact. E to extrude again. Make a little tower there. Cool. Just something to pass to add some depth. And actually, I'm going to move it away from the tower. Right there. And I'm going to make my road longer. So I got out of edit mode. Right-clicked on my road. Tab for edit. Remember, our road is not a cube. It's just a flat face. So if we just grab one edge, look, we can just move it wherever we want. So grab this edge and move it way out here. Because when we use this wide angle lens we're going to set up, it's going to look super epic. Okay. Okay, now let's make the light posts. Get out of edit mode, Shift A, make another cube, G, Y to grab and move it here. We're going to add the mirror modifier again. Surprise, surprise. Tab to edit mode, move it over, shrink it down really small. And we want it to be right on the edge of this road. Now how small is really depending on the camera you set up, so we probably should have set up our camera and then really got to modeling this, but we're going to do things wrong for once. Going to face edit mode, I'm going to move this face up. If I press Z, it stays on the Z axis. Extrude again and make it smaller. Extrude all the way up, and then up one little bit so that we have a face here that we can extrude out. Move it up on the Z axis. Maybe back a little bit, and then out like that. Now this face under here is going to be what? Our light source. Well, not a real light source. We're going to make it bright though, so that this actually is a light post. And let's use the array modifier to move this bad boy all the way down the road without having to do extra work. So we only have one set, right? Which is mirrored. Add another modifier, which is the array modifier. Not on the X, but on the Y. So 0 and 1. Now look at that. That's a little too close. So don't enter 1 here. Maybe, yeah, not too bad. Maybe 20. Okay. And then increase this number to make all the arrayed copies all the way down and make it stop before the building right there. I'm going to make this 30. I just feel like they're a little too close. It's an obnoxious amount of light on this highway. Especially for a dark, grimy Tron City. Okay, so let's set up our camera. I already have a camera item made, which is right here. It's actually invisible. You can see it hanging out for no good reason up here. But we can align that camera to this view by doing Control-Alt-0 or Command-Option-0 if you're on Mac. So now it just basically copied the camera to what we were seeing. But we need to make it exact. Let's go to our object properties. For the X, type in 0. So look, it's right in the middle. Y is okay, and Z means it's off the ground. Let's just make it 1, so it's a little bit lower. Maybe 0.5. I think we want a nice low angle, like someone's actually on the street. Now the angles, let's make X 90, Y 0, and Z 0. There we go. This is a perfect straight on camera angle, but it's a little too straight and boring, so I'm going to press R, X, so I can rotate on the X axis and put it right about here. Now this is a 50mm lens, which is definitely not a wide angle. So if you go to your camera properties, change this to like anything below 20 will look pretty good. We'll start at 20. Now it's too far away, so let's move it closer by pressing G, Y. Remember, Y is down the street, so look at this. Just moving my mouse, I get this epic, basically what I did with the animation you saw earlier. That's all it was the camera just moving down the street. And let's get a little closer so we don't have these little side roads cut off. There we go, cool. I've got this empty space over here in these corners. I want to fill them with something. So let's use this little tower we made. So we're just going to use the streets we've made over here to basically copy this square. Press 7 for an above view. Let's make it more of a perfect square by scaling it on the Y and then scaling it, oops, I lost it, scale it down. So I don't know what the purpose of this building is going to be other than looking cool and filling space. Control R to make a edge loop. Grab this edge and that edge and move it up. Or you can just bevel an edge if you want. Inset, make a real skinny little rectangle and bring that up. So Control L will allow you to select all of the linked faces or vertices. So that basically grabs this whole object without grabbing everything, which would be the letter A. So right click on any of these faces, Control L. Now Shift D. We want to move it exactly on the Y. So just press the letter Y. Put one maybe right here. And then we just did a duplicate on the Y. If you press Shift R, look at that, it repeats it. You could do a whole bunch, but we don't need a whole bunch. So there we go. Use your own time to make a cool city with some interesting shapes. This is like super basic and just trying to make things easy and quick. Alright, so if we press 0, that goes into our camera view. Let's make our camera a little bit wider. So let's try 10. Might be a little extreme. I don't know. Yeah, it's a little much. That's okay. There we go. I want to see some of these shapes down there. And we want to see a big beam shooting on the top of this building. Alright, so let's get to the fun part, texturing, which probably is really not fun for a lot of you, but I'll try to make it super easy and simple. So let's click on our main building, make a texture, and let's call it Tron 1. We've got to name things with this so that we know what we're working with. Now let's go to the shading tab, and I'm going to size this down, zoom out a little bit, just the minus button, so we see what we're working with. So we've got our main shader for the building itself, and we're going to make the color totally black, turn specular down, and roughness, I don't know, 0.7, probably won't even matter. Let's make another shader, so Shift A, search EM for emission, put that here, and Shift A, search add shader. So this is going to combine them together in an interesting way where we still get this, but we also get the emission on top, and we can control strength, which is really difficult if not impossible with this down here. I don't like how that works. So Shift A, search IM for image texture, and let's open our first texture that we just made, which is Tron texture. Okay, we'll do the street in a little bit. The street's probably the easiest one. Now connect the color here to the color of the emissions, and Shift A, search, let's make a color ramp. Make a color ramp right in the middle, and make the bright color like a sky blue. And let's turn the strength up to 5. Alright, now let's go to rendered mode, and I'm actually still in cycles, I think. Let's switch to Eevee. And if you haven't already, make sure your world is pure black. Alright, now, just by default, it's already tried to map this image to this crazy mesh we made. And we got some kind of cool sort of techno lines going on. We can, of course, control that. But for now, we're going to leave it how that is. Let's make a new material in the second slot, and this is just going to be an emissions texture. So just click on surface and press the letter E. Make the color the same bright blue color. Turn this up to 5. And this is what's going to give us control over the edges to make some really bright lines that are up to us. So I'm going to select a few edges here, holding Shift. There, I like these corner ones. Don't overdo it. We're going to basically turn these edges into bright white beams of light. That's a nice edge there. And then on the top, we definitely want these edges glowing nice and strong. Okay, so with these edges selected, all we're going to do is Control B to bevel them, which gives us new faces to work with. And you probably guessed it, these are going to be the glowing ones. So with these faces selected and this new material selected, click Assign, and there we go. We can add cool lines however thick we want based on the beveling. Now let's add on this face right here that's facing forwards. Let's UV edit this and really have more control over what's going on with the texture. So open our UV editor, zoom out a little bit, U to unwrap, and just click the unwrap button. It just makes a basic square there. And this is our first Tron texture we have. So we can do that. If we press R and rotate that, we can make it horizontal lines, which is maybe more what you want. Let's do that with a few other areas like this guy. U, unwrap. Maybe shrink it down to make it more, different levels of detail. I'm going to add some edge loops on this one. And then I'm going to grab all of these faces, U, and press reset. When you do reset, it actually just applies, it grabs these faces and makes them fill the whole image, which is really, really nice. And they're actually on top of each other. So see how they're copies of each other? It's because they're doing the same thing. They're in the same place. So R90. Cool. We get a nice repeating pattern there. We can even invert some of these, like these guys, R180. So it's like a mirror image. Control R to get a few more faces here to play with. The more faces you have, the better. Well, you don't want too many faces because then things just get difficult and unnecessary. R90 to make it a vertical line. I'm going to try to line it up with that blue line that's already there. That's kind of cool. I like that. Now see how these little details that I drew with the fine lines are really showing? They're giving a good sense of scale. The more small details you have, the better. Well, I guess I should re-say that. You need a good balance of small detail and large detail, because it gives that great illusion of scale. That's hard to fake. Okay, unwrap. That looks pretty cool. Gives a nice vertical thing to it. Maybe here and here and here. I'm going to inset again and unwrap that. A for all, because I've got 3 different faces here. I'm going to scale them up, and you can line them up, or you can just do it random. That looks pretty awesome. Look how little work we did, and what a cool thing we've already made. That's my kind of 3D work. Now we've only used one of the textures. We have another one we can play with. So let's click on this Tron 1, make a new material, make it Tron 1, and then click on this little double page thing. That's going to copy it. Now let's rename this to Tron 2. And in the nodes, let's open that second image texture, which is a more 90-degree one. Okay. Now let's grab maybe these 2 faces, and we have to assign this material to the faces we want. So let's grab a few faces we're gonna make on this new texture. Not too many. You want to leave a few empty gaps here and there. Okay, so click on the Tron 2 and assign, and then you unwrap. Look at that. We've got all kinds of cool stuff going on. This one is a little too large scale for me. Maybe I'll move it like that. I'm kind of not liking that diagonal I did in there. Anything else I see that just doesn't quite look right, just play with the scale until you like it. Awesome, awesome. I like it. Alright, so that's good for the building. If you're not careful, you might have like an eyeball and mouth thing going on. I had that with my first attempt, and I had to just tweak it out, get rid of it. Now let's get these streets textured. Okay, let's grab that Tron 1 material, but let's click the double page again and rename this to road. So we're copying the settings that we had before. We're just going to change the image texture. That's really all we need to do. Find our road right there. Now look at that. It did its best to apply it, which is a little wonky, funny looking. But that's okay. We can fix it by going into edit mode of the road. Click A. And look at this. UV editor automatically is showing us the Tron road texture. That's great. Now, this long rectangle is one face, okay? But look at this. Over here, it's a perfect square. So this whole image is being stretched all along this long, 10, 15 unit long road. So we need to fix that. So select this one face by pressing A, and then S, Y. And look at this. As you drag up, or you can type in numbers, I'm scaling and I'm properly mapping this image to the road. You can control, if you want these dotted lines to be longer, you can zoom out a little bit and get multiple lanes. That's kind of cool right there. Not what I did in my original, but I kind of like it. There we go. That's the basics of applying an image to a really long face, is you just need to scale the UV. If I zoom out on my UV editor over here, look. See how long that is? That's what makes it work. Alright, so we're done with that. Oh, by the way, if you select an object and you press the / on your keyboard, it basically silos out that object, which is really nice. Okay, let's grab these guys. Let's apply Tron 1. Actually, let's try Tron 2. Okay. So for this road texture, I'm going to grab these top faces, and I'm going to do U reset. Zoom in over here. So all these faces have the same image slapped on them. And we want to make it like a long streaky road. So let's try SX. Let's make it smaller. Move it over here. You basically want to zoom in. Oh, we're going the wrong direction. We need to rotate our UV by R 90 degrees. There we go. Okay, so now we got some lines. So play with it until you get something that you like, and it's a little tricky to get the placement right. Maybe you need to redo this square. There we go, lined it up. Okay, so our road's going to have some line, like circuit lines going, and that just gives that really nice impression of movement. Let's do these weird little things. Control L. Now what if we map everything? So let's press U and Smart UV Project, and that basically maps the image around the whole mesh, which it did a pretty good job. I kind of like what it's doing, but it's a little bit big. So let's press A over here. Make sure your mouse is over the UV editor. Press A and scale it up. Maybe again. You don't want it too busy, but you want the lines to be kind of skinny and, more defined. And let's do this little tower here. Press, not A, press Control L. U, Smart UV Project. I like that. Cool. Maybe move this one down to match what's next to it. Yeah. Cool. So let's press 0 and let's take a look at what things are looking like. Nice. Oh, let's add our beam. This is a fun part. Nice visual point of interest here. Let's click on one of the faces on the top of your tower and press the period button to zoom into that area. Click on this very top face, press Shift S and cursor to select it. That places our 3D cursor right there, which allows us to add a mesh right there. So Shift A, cylinder. All right. Now SZ, like big time. Drag your mouse a lot. But let's make it skinnier. So just S everything, scale it all the way down. And you know what? That's kind of cool how it's popping up right there, or popping through the mesh. Make sure it's tall enough so it's not, oh look at that, it's stopping before the frame. So let's press SZ. There we go. Cool. Now let's apply this glowing material. We need to just name it glow. Great. And if you want to add another beam going up in the middle, like one big central beam, we can do that by getting out of edit mode, pressing Shift S, cursor to select it. So what is selected? This whole mesh. The center of it is right there in the middle. So Shift A, make another cylinder, GZ to move it up here, scale it down a little bit, SZ to make it really tall. Now we need to apply that glowing texture. There we go. Maybe not that thick. Maybe there. Okay, so if we press 0, oh, it's stopping before the cameras. There we go. All right, I'm happy with that. Now let's set up our glow or our bloom effect. Go over here to the camera, check bloom, and play with these settings. We got threshold, which is basically how bright does something have to be to glow. In this case, everything is glowing at 5, like value 5 for the emission. So that doesn't really apply to this. Radius is like how large that hazy area is. Don't make it too big. Don't make it too small. Depends on how cyberpunky and how hazy you want it to be. Intensity is how bright it is. There we go. And to give a kind of ground, you could make a plane, size it up really big, like 20 or maybe 5 times that. Make sure you're not cutting off anything. So let's move it up and down pretty low down here. Or you can make it kind of a dark gray. I'm going to do the grid thing. So I'm going to make a new texture, and the image it's going to be used is, I'm going to cheat here. We didn't make this picture in this this tutorial, but I'm sure you can find a grid image online somewhere. I'm going to use this the square grid right there, and I'm going to UV map it to be huge. So there's a lot of grids. Look at that. I just did S100, so I scaled this UV up by 100. Maybe even again. Let's do S3. Nah, S2. So now we have like this ground grid, and as the camera moves, you'll get a really big sense. Let me zoom out a little bit. Where's my camera? You'll get a really strong sense of motion as we go over this grid. Oh, and we didn't do the light posts. Let's go to our light post. Look at this. I still have that face selected that I showed you earlier. If you don't have that, just zoom into your light post object, grab that face right there, and add the glow. Now we don't want everything to glow, so we actually need to add just like a normal, let's add like the Tron 1 texture to it. Maybe Tron 2. And then on this face specifically, we're going to add a second material, which is glow and a sign. And then everything else, I'm going to do Control I to grab the other faces. I don't really like how that mapped that, so I'm just going to smart project that. Let's try unwrap. It's doing weird angles. I don't like that. So let's just do reset. There we go. I just sized the UVs down big time. So there's just a few little indications of light. You can do that however you want. Cool. One thing I did on mine was I actually made like a trail going down to the street. I did I for inset, and I made this really thin line that was also the glow texture. So it's like the light's going up this wire into the filament, and we have that cool glow. The last thing I'll show you is how to add a sky image behind it. Really easy. It's actually an add-on you may have disabled, but it's called Images as Planes. So it's in the File Import screen. If you don't have that, go to your Preferences, go to Add-ons, and just type in Planes. Import Images as Planes. It just brings an image in, slaps it onto a plane, and puts it in your 3D area. Saves you some time. So, File, Import, Images as Planes, and I have a folder of skies. I'm going to find a dark and gloomy sky because, in Cyberpunk world, it's never nice weather. It's always cloudy and dark. Pretty much always nighttime, kind of like Gotham. So I'm going to use this one right here, which is the same one that I used in my actual final render. Let's size it up. And let's move it behind. So GY. Move it right up there. And the reason why we don't see anything is because there's no light to shine on it. It's just a black plane with nothing visible, because we need to have this as an emission plane. So search EM for emissions, put it right there, and drag this green dot to right there. Cool. So this is actually emitting light. It's a nice trick. When you have a dark scene, if you're just doing emission type stuff like this, like techno things, your images have to be on emission. So let's go to our camera, see how it's looking. Oh, it's really small. So S, size it up. RX to rotate it, kind of facing at the camera, like flat. And right there, maybe move it up. You can also play with the levels if you need it to be darker. Do Shift A, color, and RGB curves, and you can just drop this curve down to make it a little less, a little less crazy. You can scale it if you need to. Now, last thing, if you want to animate this like I did, open up the graph editor. Put your camera at the beginning position, which was the farthest away from the building I could get without losing stuff. This is like the starting position, right? Point A. Press I and location. That makes a keyframe for that location. Go to the ending frame, if we want it to be maybe 300 frames long. And then we're going to put it at the ending position. So GY, maybe you wanted to have it come up right to the front of the building. There, that's the ending position. And we're on frame 300, so I, location. And now it's going to add keyframes and animate it for you. When you do keyframes like this, look at this. It automatically has like an easing curve where it starts out slow, speeds up, and then it'll slow down at the end. I don't want that for this example, so I'm actually going to change it to the vector form of interpolation. So with all the keyframes selected, you can just do A, we only have 2, press V and vector. There we go, it's a straight line, there's no easing or ramping, and for this type of animation, that's what we want. Also be sure to put your maximum or your end point frames over here. I did 300, it's a little fast, but you can do whatever you want. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I enjoyed making it. If you make something with what you've learned in this video, I would love to see it. Render it, send it to me any way you can, email, social media, whatever. I love seeing art from my viewers. So thanks for watching and have a great week.